I'm advised that the rules are unconstitutional and unlawful in that they amount to a violation of the constitutionality prescribed duty imposed on organs of state to protect the independence of Chapter 9 institutions. The rules also do not adequately provide the audi alteram partem rule, the principle of listening to both sides of the story at all in their application and implementation.
Well, that's the gist of our conversation today. Hello and welcome to Unfiltered on SABC 3 and the SABC News Channel 404. I'm Desiree Chauke. The Office of the Public Protector, an instrument through which citizens can realize the promise of democracy as eloquently laid out in the Constitution of South Africa. It is there to assist members of society to hold those in power accountable for the abuse of power vested in them by the public. What then happens when the office itself is under scrutiny? Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane's fitness to hold office is currently under question. She has been found by the High Courts to lack integrity, competence and honesty and independence. Pressure groups and political parties have since lobbied the National Assembly to start a process to have her removed, citing several adverse court findings against her. But is this enough? Now Parliament has set the ball in motion. Should it succeed, Mkhwebane will become the first public protector to be impeached since 1994. But Mkhwebane is going to court to hold the parliamentary process to investigate her fitness to hold office, a process that could lead to her removal. What are the implications of impeachment on the office of the public protector should Parliament succeed? Let's welcome our guest. Stephanie Fick is the Chief Legal Officer at OUTA, the organization undoing tax abuse. And from our Pretoria studio, we're joined by political analyst Professor Lesiba Defo from UNISA. In Sea Point, Cape Town, we're joined by Lawson Naidu. He's the Executive Director for the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. And on the line, we have DA Shadow Minister for Justice, Glenys Breitenbach. Our social media question for tonight is, do you have faith in the public, in the office of the public protector? Do join us in this discussion on Facebook and Twitter using our hashtags at SABC News Online and SABC News Unfiltered. Let's bring in Ms. Breitenbach. Your party started this ball rolling, but I'm just reminded of a former leader of the Democratic Alliance who's now a leader in the background, Helen Zille, who wrote a book, Not Without a Fight. The public protector is not going to go down without a fight, is she?
Hello?
Ms. Breitenbach, can you hear us? We're on air.
I can hear you. There's a lot of noise in the background.
Apologies for that. I was asking you the question about you having initiated this process,
Yes.
But indications are that the public protector is not going down without a fight.
That's fine. She's perfectly entitled to not go down without a fight. If she holds the view that she's correct and has done nothing wrong, then of course it's her prerogative to fight. The rules that have been instituted by Parliament are fair in my view. They're constitutional, they meet all the requirements. They require an independent panel to scrutinize evidence that is gathered, including giving her the opportunity to rebut any of the allegations in writing. So it meets all the requirements of due process. And a decision will be taken in due course. So it's a constitutional process that follows the rule of law, follows due process, and the DA is of the view that Ms. Mkhwebane is not and never has been fit to hold the office of the public protector. What's happened in the interim has merely reinforced our view. You mentioned some of the instances. She was found to be acting mala fide by the Constitutional Court. As a result, she's got personal cost orders against her. She has a revolving door of staff in her office, and when they leave under very dubious circumstances. There's been, just of late, a whistleblower making very serious allegations against her and the office. There's the very cozy relationship with the State Security Agency that's deeply concerning for a Chapter 9 institution that's meant to be independent. So all of these things now must be considered.
Your previous efforts to question her character were thrown out of the courts. What are the chances of success for this parliamentary process?
Well, our previous efforts have not been thrown out of court. They were voted down by the ANC. So they were not supported by the
also
ANC
didn't agree with you.
But certainly, the evidence against her is mounting. She's not covered herself in glory, and she's made some very dubious findings, and she's behaved in a fashion that is less than salutary. So for somebody who's the head of a Chapter 9 institution, and for which independence is an absolute requirement, I believe that the evidence is now stacked up so high that nobody can ignore it.
Stephanie, there is sentiment that challenging the impeachment process could be another wasteful expenditure on the part of the Public Protector. How's Outa feeling about the Public Protector's response to the parliamentary process in terms of wanting to defend herself?
I think the response of the Public Protector to the parliamentary process is mildly bizarre. But that's hardly surprising. She, again, has not always acted in the most rational fashion. The process has been adopted by Parliament. The rules have been adopted correctly. There is no challenge to be mounted against them. She should, in all fairness, allow the process to run its course. She will have every opportunity to put her view and to defend herself. And again, it's to be considered by an independent panel. So she has nothing to fear. But her response has been, yes, well, mildly bizarre to say the least.
Yeah, Stephanie?
I think I agree. If you look at the process, I mean, Parliament discussed the rules, and I think it was a process. And if you look at, constitutionally, there has to be a process in order to move a Chapter 9 institution. That's clear in our constitution. And then it was just about to fine-tune the rules as to how do we get there. And I think reading the rules, it gives her a fair opportunity to give her side of the story. Like Glenys has said, there's an independent, forum that will look at the facts before. So, I mean, it's probably her prerogative, but from civil society, there is a bit of a question, and from our point of view, is that do we have to drag this process out any further? Let's follow the process. The fact that the process has started doesn't predetermine the outcome. The process is there in order to give her a fair chance and listen to all the facts. And it's again a question of, can we just start the process in order to finalize or come to a conclusion, whether that's in her favor or not?
You're indeed correct about it not determining the outcome, because we put this question out to social media and the responses are so divided. But Lawson Naidoo, CASIC has always maintained that these challenges are wasteful expenditure. Just your thoughts about the latest development in this conversation. All right, I have a suspicion that Lawson Naidoo cannot hear us, so we're going to just try to reconnect with him on this one. And let's bring Professor Lesiba Defo into the conversation. Prof, concerns about a predetermined outcome. How have you been engaging with this conversation?
Yeah. The lines are not particularly clear, and there is a lot in the background. However, let me try to respond if indeed I understand the question. I think in the colloquial language, some would say the Public Protector should just chill. Let her just relax. Lest people say, indeed, she doesn't understand the law. She just said, the principle of audi parteram rule should be upheld. Each party must be given a hearing. We aren't there yet. She can raise it, and rightly so, and she can get immense support if she's denied the right to at least give her side of the story. But she's being preemptive, And some people might say, why so? That's one. But the most primary thing, the rules are not about Mkhwebane. It's just unfortunate that her name is out there in the public eye. But the rules are about the leadership of Chapter 9 institutions. There was provision, but as to how to remove them, it was not there. They are trying to remedy that defect. And thereafter, the process will begin. Why should be preemptive? Yeah, somebody might say the guilty are afraid.
Mr. Naidu, I don't know if you can hear us at this juncture. Are you convinced that we can clearly indicate misconduct, incapacity and incompetence in this in relation to the advocate? All right, let's take a break. You're watching Unfiltered, and when we return, we'll try and get Mr. Naidu's thoughts on tonight's discussion.
I see no reason to remove the current public protector. She's doing a marvelous job. We know of people who are being approached, and very soon we are going to say that publicly. People who are being approached to try and implicate some of the comrades within the African National Congress. And that is being done by some of the leaders and members of the African National Congress.
Welcome back. You're watching a conversation here on Unfiltered about the current public protector, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, and a process that has been started in Parliament to look at ways in which to remove a public protector. Professor Tifo, let's bring you back in. I don't know if you heard that clip, former Northwest Premier Suprema Humapelu saying that she has the full confidence in this public protector and that the ANC will support her, and it's something that the ANC has come back to a rebuttal from the ANC saying we are not in support or not for or against the current public protector. What are your thoughts about the seesawing of the African National Congress, the mother body and its members, its senior members? Okay, we're having that kind of day in terms of our technical position, but let me try bring Mr. Naidu in. Mr. Naidu, are you able to hear Johannesburg? All right, both our remote guests are not able to hear us, so we're going to leave them out of the conversation for now until that is sorted out. Let's bring in Ms. Glynis Breitenbach once again. Ms. Breitenbach, how far is the process in terms of parliamentary processes? Goodness, we seem to be having problems with the lines as well. I wonder if it has anything to do with the power outages. Yeah, they might be affecting our lines. Let's just talk about Outer Stephanie and your involvement in this process. You've also made submissions to Parliament. Are you happy that Parliament is listening?
Well, we're extremely happy that they're following this process, that it's an open and fair process in our mind, and that process should continue so that we can finally get to an answer. Now, we did petition Parliament before they instituted the rules, if you want to say that, highlighting some of the things that we believe that a Chapter 9 institution should not be, if I can put it in brackets, be guilty of. Yeah. So we were concerned about certain actions. Do we have faith in the public protector as a Chapter 9 institution? Of course, it's important for that to be there. It's
so the institution, not the person.
But not the current person. I do not think we believe that some of her actions are really, she didn't perform her duty in terms of her constitutional obligation.
Will your complaints be able to hold muster in court in terms of, is it misconduct, is it incapacity, is it incompetence?
Well, firstly, it's incompetence, and I think that there are also evidence of misconduct. Just if you look at some of the reports that was taken on review and the remarks and comments by court and remarks and comments by the highest court in our land, the Constitutional Court.
But one would argue that it's in the normal course of dispensing of justice. Sometimes judges will have decisions that are questioned.
Of course, that's the beauty about our system.
How does that render one incompetent then?
It's about the comments that was made by the court. Now, a review is about the rationality of your recommendations and all of that. It's not about whether I would come to a different conclusion because I feel differently about the facts. It's about, did you, as the in this instance, the public protector, was your recommendation rational?
Yeah.
And did you come to that recommendation rationally? And what is so tragic about this? It's not about, let's take the recommendations off the table for a little bit. The way in which she conducted her investigations, her constitutional obligation is to conduct these investigations impartial, without fear, without prejudice. And the court remarked, Istina matter. She didn't investigate that matter at all. And do we as South Africans want that? I believe no. There were complainants in this matter that, I mean, it's a tragedy that she didn't even look at the position of those farmers in Estina. And do we want that from a constitutional institution? No.
Stephanie Fick is from the organization Undoing Tax Abuse Outer, and we hope when we come back from this break we can bring back in the rest of our panel. Let's take a break.
Way of background, there are several parties, both in the executive and the legislature, who are currently or have recently been the subjects of my investigation. In addition, members of the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services in the 5th administration, who have publicly pronounced and passed judgment on the very issues which reportedly forms part of the subject of the complaint by the DA.
Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane there. In our conversation today, let's bring in your thoughts. Nechivambe 937 saying, I had faith at the beginning of her term, although I had some doubts, but decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. It's all gone now. At Melim53 saying, I have faith in God. Our public protector was appointed based on her competence, experience, relevant qualifications, and she was the best and better than other candidates who were interviewed with her. Tony Ngabashe saying yes, because she's touching the untouchable politicians, I suppose, saying that's why she's getting into trouble. Those are some of your thoughts, but quite a few responses on social media. Our respondents very divided on this one. Those who support her 100%, and those who don't believe in her capability also saying she's got to go.
Yeah, and I think it's actually unfortunate in the sense that I think it's also a bit politicized. I mean, the last Twitter comment about, she's taking the untouchable and it's true. Her or a Chapter 9 institution, the public protector's duty is to look at to look at government, and state institutions. So does that mean that she is supposed to take on the untouchable? There shouldn't be untouchables. Let's start there. Yeah. But yes, she will take on and she will make the uncomfortable, he or she will make the uncomfortable recommendations. But I would like to come back. It's not, again, about who she took on and who she didn't. it's about the way she got there. We are worried about the way she conducts her investigations. And the fact that she shows bias in some of her investigations. I would like to believe, and I would really think that South Africans would like to have confidence in a person that will go after an investigation no matter what, but will do it competently.
Mr. Naidu, let's bring you into the conversation now, the process with the public protector, some concerns about what appears to be an abuse of state institutions to settle scores. You have been part of this process, especially contributing to Parliament as KSEC. Do you believe it's an abuse of state institutions?
No, I certainly don't. I think we must go back to the Constitution, which very clearly gives the responsibility to remove the Public Protector from office to Parliament, specifically to the National Assembly. The National Assembly has now developed rules in terms of that constitutional requirement. It's rules that are based very much on the process adopted with regards to the impeachment of the President. And all parties in the National Assembly adopted these rules last year. They were adopted unanimously. They provide for a fair, open and transparent process, we believe. And the Public Protector needs to subject herself to the authority of Parliament and to public accountability. She appears to be suggesting that she is above accountability and that nobody can hold her to account. Now, in our system of our constitutional democracy, there's a separation of powers, but the legislature has certain powers, and if they abuse that power, then the courts will intervene. But I don't think that at this point there's any suggestion that the Parliament is abusing its power. The Public Protector is seeking to suggest that she's not being afforded a right to respond to the allegations, and very contrary to her view, the rules make it very clear that when the panel of experts is established, the Public Protector will have the right to make submissions in writing, because let's remember that that panel of experts has to produce its report within 30 days, so they don't have time for oral hearings. If the matter moves to a second stage and a committee of Parliament is established to interrogate the complaint more thoroughly, then the Public Protector has the right to appear before that committee, to bring a legal representative along with her and argue her case. So she needs to subject herself to this process, and if she has nothing to hide, then she will, the complaint will be dismissed.
Professor Tefo, on the one hand, there's parliamentary processes and the legal process, and on the other hand, it's public perception and all the support that the Public Protector is getting from some quarters of society. How do we balance the two?
Look, we have to find a balance and we have to be fair to her as well. It's just that she is preemptive in my assessment. And that's where you begin to invite people to say, what is it that she makes her so edgy, rather than to wait for due process to be followed? After all, she's a legal person. She understands that. But then there is a political dimension to this, right? And I find it even more interesting that
Prof, as it happens with
preemptive.
Prof, as it happens with live conversations, we have time constraints. Let me ask you to hold on to that thought, and we say goodbye to our SABC3 viewers. Please join us on the SABC News Channel 404 for continuation of this conversation.
We will engage with the Speaker, and we've written the letter. We've given her an opportunity to respond. So if the Speaker doesn't respond, as I've indicated, we are engaging with the legal team. We will then view or take other relevant actions to follow. I must indicate that I stated in that letter that if we can amicably resolve the matter. So I don't think it will reach that particular level of engagement.
You're watching Unfiltered tonight. Our guest, Stephanie Fick, Chief Legal Officer at OUTA, Lawson Naidu, Executive Director, Council for the Advancement of Southern African Constitution, CASAC, Professor Lesiba Defo, political analyst, and Muslinis Breitenbach from the Democratic Alliance, Shadow Minister of Justice. And you're also interacting with us on this conversation for tonight. Zandisile Sil saying, nope, she's not the protector of the public, but she's a political tool. Her predecessor helped recover money stolen from the public. She, on the other hand, investigates private matters. Hashtag CR17 is a private matter. Let's take a look at Nazim Mkhwebane, who's saying, I do have faith in Advocate Mkhwebane, but she made a lot of mistakes in her investigations by being selective on who should be investigated by her office. Now the cabals are using that against her. Anthony Chinyao saying, very competent. Unfortunately, she's touching others in their studio. That's why there's a coordinated attack from Parliament, the Hawks, SARS, and so on and so forth. All right. Before we went to break, we were listening to Professor Defo. Please, Prof, you're welcome to continue your thoughts and finish up the point you were making.
But look, and I hear the sentiments being expressed by other people, even from the commentators, that I think she may be having some skill, some knowledge, some expertise, but this position for me does look like it is fairly too big for her. And there was almost a colossus that went before her, and her boots were too big for her to fill. But rather to malign her, but I would say, it might be in her interest to admit that maybe rather than to be impeached and dismissed, I should step down voluntarily, because then you save yourself and those closest to you the anonymity of the torturous process that ultimately would impact negatively on your career and all those around you. She has done her bit, she has contributed, but she must also pause, and her advisors must also pause and reflect a bit and say, we had about 4 or 5 public protectors. They were never subjected to this. Is it really because almost everybody under the sun hates her or thinks she's incompetent? Surely let her be honest with herself. She did her best, but let her admit the mistakes are too many to be ignored. And this process, I'm almost convinced. I hear Mtate Mahumapelo what he's saying, but I think even if 50% of the ANC were to vote against the motion, the other 50% together with the DA and the so-called small parties would still carry the day. Does he want to go that far? I would advise against that.
Lawson Naidu, in the questions that are being raised in the merit for the removal of Busisiwe Mkhwebane, can we say that, can we admit the importance of the correctness of the process to remove a constitutional being?
Well, it's a very thorough and detailed process. In terms of the Constitution, if a committee of Parliament recommends that she be removed from office, it will require a 2/3 majority of members of the National Assembly before that is done. So the bar is set very high, and it's quite correctly makes it very difficult for Parliament to dismiss the head of a Chapter 9 institution. These are independent institutions whose independence ought to be protected, and the Constitution and the rules of Parliament do in fact do that. But it does not mean, as I said earlier, that the head of a Chapter 9 institution is beyond accountability, and that there are no mechanisms that can be put in place to hold somebody who has behaved in the manner that Advocate Mkhwebane has, and to not to answer to the many failings that she has demonstrated. These are failings that have been pronounced upon by the courts, including the highest court in the country, the Constitutional Court, which lamented her lack of understanding of her mandate, of the law governing the office of the Public Protector, and her constitutional mandate. So these are very serious findings by our courts that really call into question her capacity to do the job. And as the Prof said just now, she may well be qualified in other areas, but this job is certainly something that is far too big for her. And the sooner that I believe that she is removed from office, the sooner we can begin to restore the integrity of the Office of the Public Protector and ensure that it actually discharges its constitutional responsibility, to provide access to justice for ordinary South Africans.
Do you think the Speaker of the National Assembly will be responding to that letter that the Public Protector has sent through about wanting to deal with this amicably? Lawson?
Well, I think the Office of the Speaker put out a statement yesterday, in fact, on Sunday, to say that they do not believe that there is anything wrong with the rules of Parliament. They don't see any reason on the basis of the letter that was sent by the Public Protector to the Office of the Speaker why they should halt the process. And they've indicated that they're going to proceed with this matter, that the Speaker has, we know, asked for parties to make nominations for the independent panel, which is due on Friday this week. And we would certainly hope that very soon thereafter the Speaker will announce the composition of the panel and that they can begin the task of sifting through the information that has been submitted by the DA, any responses that are forthcoming from the Public Protector, and make its recommendation to the National Assembly.
Prof, considering the divided sentiment within the African National Congress, how do we give this process a chance at all in Parliament in terms of the ANC's support? Because in terms of numbers, their support will be required for this motion to be successful. In terms of numbers, their support will be required for this motion to be successful.
Look, if you take into account 2017, an attempt was made and failed. 2019, an attempt was made, again it failed. But now there is an appetite, right, from within the ANC, that we could even think about revisiting and crafting the new rules for this process. It tells you there is an appetite to pursue this matter to its logical conclusion, whatever the outcome, right? It's just unfortunate. It is about Chapter 9 institutions, but Mem Mkhwebane, her name is central. It's just incidental, but at the same time, there is prima facie case that speaks to her incompetence based on the numerous court findings against her. On that basis, I think the people are saying, can we subject this to an objective test and a definitive pronouncement is made as to whether she's fit or not fit? The jury is still out, but I suspect the ANC, though divided, it would still carry the day, given the support you would get from the DA and the so-called small parties.
Well, all indications at the moment are that, as I indicated in the beginning, she will not go down without a fight. Stephanie, how far is OUTA willing to just be part of this process to ensure that you have your desired outcome?
Well, we will be part of this process as far as we are allowed. I mean, I think everyone has said there's now a parliamentary process that must follow. And they will take all the facts into consideration, make the recommendation, and then it's in Parliament's hands. And let's not preempt. Let the process follow, and let's see what the end is about. And depending on what happens there, then we'll consider any next steps. But I think we are confident in Parliament, and eyes are on Parliament to see if they can follow the process and to what conclusion they can drive this process. So let's see.
Mr. Naidu, are you also convinced that there's political will suddenly to see this matter to its natural progression and conclusion?
Well, I think it would be foolhardy to try and second guess what members of Parliament might ultimately decide. But as has been said, if the process is open and transparent, the information is placed before the Parliamentary Committee and members of Parliament, they must then make up their minds and do what is is right, do what is in the best interest of the people of South Africa, do what is in the best interest of a critical Chapter 9 institution, and rescue that institution from the downhill path that it's been on. So, yes, I have confidence in this parliamentary process, but ultimately this is a political decision. You know, the Constitution gives the responsibility to members of Parliament to take this decision. And, you know, of course, political factors come into play, but we would certainly hope that they look at, measure up, and make a decision based on the evidence that is before them.
Ndadete, for the Black Lawyers Association is supporting Advocate Mkhwebane and saying that she's being treated unfairly. These are credible legal minds. What do you think would bring them to this conclusion?
I wonder if they are unanimous. I wonder if they are ad idem, right? If you were to zero in, you might find that there is also a section or a faction within that. But all things being said, shall we allow this process to go run its course? There is another unit called Democratic What? They also say they are in support of her. There is the ATM also in support of her, and it is their right to do so. But we have got institutions that the Constitution prescribes how they must handle matters of this nature. Shall we allow the process to run its course and be ready to embrace the ultimate decision? Let's just prepare ourselves, lest we create some problems again when the decision isn't in our favor.
Losa Naidu, I asked the Prof this question earlier, and I don't know what your feeling is about it, where we separating the parliamentary process with the sentiment on the ground in terms of people. We sent out a question today asking our viewers if they feel that the public protector is competent, and overwhelming support for her work. How do we separate the two, the process and the sentiment?
Well, I mean, I think there are certainly various interest groups that, that are clearly out there to support the public protector, come what may. And, social media plays a role in that, but I don't think that we can take that as necessarily reflecting the pulse of the nation on this issue. I think, one would have to go much deeper in order to try and reach such a conclusion. And that is why the Constitution reposes this responsibility in members of Parliament to take this decision. Of course, when members consider the issue, they will consider the views of members of the public and the views of civil society organizations and the like. But ultimately, they have to weigh up all of those factors together with the evidence when coming to their decision. So lobby groups will play their role in the way that civil society organizations like CASAC do, but on the basis of informed input, and not just on the basis of a particular preference for a particular individual. There's got to be some logical basis for putting forward an argument to say that the public protector is fit to hold office or that she is not fit to hold office. So let's try and focus in on the facts. And as many of us have said here this evening, we need to allow this process in Parliament to unfold so that the information can be brought forward and that we take an informed view as to whether or not the public protector is required to be removed from office.
Take another break here on Unfiltered. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
There are no grounds for her because nothing is going to be concluded without her being heard on by the ad hoc committee if we reach that particular stage. But now I think she's very panicking, and she must just calm down and allow the processes to unfold.
That simply because the public protector has got findings against the sitting president, against Pravin Gordhan, she must be removed. Those reports must have their day in court. They must see their light, they must be ventilated, and these two individuals ought to be held accountable. We're not going to remove or support the removal of the public protector because she's touching the untouchable.
Of course, the different sentiment there, the leader of the ANC caucus in Parliament, repeating those sentiments that were said by all our guests tonight, that she has no reason to worry because she will be given an opportunity to present her side of the story. Let's take a look at what you're saying. Black Nativity saying, yes, I do. Her appointment was based on merit and competency. She must be given space, like we all have always done with her predecessors. I only knew that Thuli Madonsela on her last 2 years. So what's the rush now? Let her do her job. Another tweet. Okay, our tweets are taking a bit longer to load. Bubele Stirman saying, no, I do not have an ounce of faith in her after that Vrede Dairy report debacle. And Colin M saying, I don't think that should be a question. We gave Madonsela space even though she fumbled. Why can't it be with Mkhwebane? All right, you're watching Unfiltered and our conversation today about a process that was approved in Parliament last week that could lead or may lead to the removal of the public protector. And something that all our guests have mentioned today, that she had big shoes to fill, mentioned in our tweets as well. Prof, Advocate Thuli Madonsela has previously said that she doesn't want Ms. Mkhwebane to be judged on the work that she did. We can't get away from that inevitability, can we?
No.
We can't get away from that inevitability, can we?
She made it possible. I would not have wanted her to be judged that way. She made it possible. In as much as we have had previous people who were in that position, but their names don't come into the picture. And they did a good job, by the way. Right? But look, I am for truth, no matter who tells it. I am for justice, no matter who it is for or against. Let's be fair to her. Let the process not only be fair, but be seen to be fair. And let her just calm down and chill and allow this process to run its course. It might indeed conclude in her favor, though I would be fairly surprised.
Dr. Nadu, is it fair to judge Busisiwe Mkhwebane on Thuli Madonsela's record?
No, I don't think it would be, and I don't think anybody is doing that. I mean, I think she's being judged on her performance in office and the number of cases that have been taken on review that she has lost. She keeps challenging and appealing these decisions and keeps losing in all of the courts in the country. And it is on that basis that she's being judged. Yes, there might be people out there who would argue that Advocate Madonsela set the bar very high and Advocate Mkhwebane has fallen below that standard. But you know, that's ultimately is not the question that we need to be asking right now. The question is she capable of doing the job? And the number of court judgments that have gone against her, tells us that she is not capable of doing the job properly according to the standard that is required in terms of the Constitution, never mind any of her predecessors. So I think let's focus on our own performance and say, is that level of performance what we expect from an independent institution set up in terms of our Constitution? I would argue that her conduct falls far short of that, and the courts have in fact said that on several occasions.
Phemetse Sibanda has written an article where he argues that judges do make mistakes, Lawson. And that does not necessarily constitute the grounds for removal.
It's prawns and punch.
Set of circumstances. Of course, judges make mistakes, and we have an appeal process, and judgments get set aside and overturned on appeal. But those are on matters of law that different lawyers and judges may disagree on an interpretation of the law and so on. But in no instance can I recall where judges' bona fides and understanding of the law is being called into question, in the way that the character of Advocate Mkhwebane has been questioned by the courts, her understanding of the basic clear law that is set out in the Public Protector Act, in other legislation in the Constitution. So I think it's a fundamentally different set of circumstances, and it's an anomaly that is totally inappropriate in the circumstances.
So this process that gets away in Parliament, Stephanie, clearly the Public Protector saying that she wants it ended in an amicable way, but the Speaker not seeming very convinced. What can we expect in terms of way forward?
Well, I think the process must unfold. I think what the Speaker has also said is, and I agree, is that this is a process that was voted on by Parliament. There's nothing that the Speaker necessarily can do. There's the rules, and they now have to follow the rules. The committee will be appointed. Hopefully that will be announced. And that process will just needs to unfold and get to a logic conclusion. And that's all that we can hope for at this point, is to put, and I agree with all the guests. I think that there's enough evidence and facts out there to show why we say that that she's incompetent, and I think there's clear signs of misconduct. And I know it's difficult, but we should take the emotion out of it. This is an advocate. She's an officer of the court, and despite everything else, despite except for the fact that she is a institution in terms of the Constitution and so forth, she's also an advocate, and that the bar for her conduct is extremely high, and if she doesn't reach it, she should be removed.
A last question to all of our guests as we approach the end of the show tonight. This is quite an important conversation. It impacts on our constitutionalism in terms, how important will the outcomes of this process be in terms of taking South Africa's democracy forward? Prof, let me start with you. In terms of taking South Africa's democracy forward. Prof, let me start with you.
Look, I think it is the right thing that is being done right now. It's just unfortunate that there is a particular individual around whom the matter seems to revolve. But it sends a message that says, live up to the oath of office that you have taken. And let's not run away from the fact that if the bona fides of the judge and his or her conduct impacts on the integrity and the dignity of the office of a judge, such a judge can be impeached and be removed. Mkhwebane, as I understand, it is about her knowledge of the law, her understanding and interpretation of the law, and the general incompetence. But there is a higher level that seems to suggest that there are some her bona fides in terms of how she applies the law seems to tilt on the side of bias. But again, I don't want to be preemptive. I'm saying let's be fair to her. Let the process be seen to be fair to her, and then we respect, including herself, the outcome of this process, and let others learn from this. There are lessons to learn out of this, that people must live up to the oath that they have taken.
Lawson Naidoo, how significant is the decision taken by National Assembly last week to proceed with this?
Well, the National Assembly has rules in place. A properly formulated complaint was lodged by the DA. The Speaker had no option but to proceed with that motion from the DA and to put in place what the rules require her to do. So there's no real discretion that the Speaker has in this regard. What I think is important, and what will help strengthen our constitutional democracy in this process, is ensuring that the process continues, that it is an open, fair and transparent process. All sides of the all information is brought to bear, and Parliament applies itself to that. I think we should stop focusing on the outcome and ensure that the process is correct, because hopefully if we get the process correct, we'll get the right outcome. But trying to sort of prejudge it by focusing just on the outcome, I think undermines the integrity of the process itself, which I would argue is fundamentally important.
Lawson Naidu and Professor Lisiba Tefo, let me thank you for contributing to our conversation tonight. Stephanie, let me end with you. Proposed outcome for Outa?
Well, I think a fair process, that all the facts will be laid, before Parliament. I think it's an important step because we need some accountability in South Africa. I think we are in a specific position where, I think accountability lacked for if you think about state capture and all the corruption and the utter devastation that corruption brought to South Africa. The health system, everything, and a lot of that can be laid in front of the door of corruption. But to come back to, so it's we need to take accountability for what happened, and this is part of a process. Parliament having the opportunity to actually say, but we have the authority in this instance.
All right, we're going to have to end it there. We're time tight, but thank you so much for watching Unfiltered tonight. We're back again next week, Monday. Join us then. Bye-bye.